simple definition for food chain. So, food chain, it is the simplest form of feeding relationship. It is a simple way to show the energy flows in the ecosystem. But when we talk about food web, okay, so here it's definition. So food web is a diagram of feeding relationship that includes multiple intersecting food chains. So kung sa ating food chain, it is the simplest form ng feeding relationship. Sa ating food web naman, it has a multiple intersecting food chain. So medyo complicated siya ng konti kasi mas marami tayong makikitang food chain and mas maraming animals na makikita sa ating food web compare sa food chains. Okay, it demonstrates a more realistic representation of how feeding relationship connects an organism in an ecosystem. So a food web shows many paths of energy movement through an ecosystem. It also indicates that each organism eats and is eaten by several organisms. So, okay. So, yun nga, sa food chain, mas madali lang siyang tignan kung kumpara sa ating food web na medyo complicated siya kasi masyado siyang maraming food chain, maraming araw-araw. So, here we have an example of food web. Okay. So, here's the food web. Okay. So, of course, laging mauuna ang ating producer, which is the tree or the green plant. Sa kanya unang nanggagaling yung ating energy in our food web and food chain. So, the next one is, tingnan po natin yung arrow na tinuturo dito from the tree we have. So, we have 3 arrow here. We have the arrow going to the mouse, to the rabbit, and to the goat. So, always remember, ang represent ng arrow is where is the energy is going. Para hindi malito, so, laging tatandaan na ang arrow is showing or it shows where the energy is going in every food web and every food chain. So, ang ibig sabihin po dito, yung energy na kinain ng ating mouse from the tree ay mapupunta sa ating mouse. The same goes with our rabbit and our goat. So, here, sa mouse, as we can see, meron tayong 4 na arrow sa ating mouse kung saan papunta siya sa snake, sa owl, sa wildcat, and sa ating rabbit. So, it means it's not only one consumers will eat our mouse. It can be 2, it can be 3 or 4. Doon na po pumapasok ang food web na hindi katulad sa food chain, na iisa lang yung pwedeng kumain sa ating primary consumers. So, okay. Sa ating rabbit naman, it can be eaten by our wildcat or our jackal. The same with our goat na it can be eaten by our jackal and our lion. So, punta tayo kay owl. So, we call owl as an apex kasi no one will eat them. We call animals in the food chain and food web on the top of the food chain and food web apex because no one will eat them. Okay. So the snake can be eaten by the kite or eagle. Our wildcat can be eaten by the lion. Jackal can be eaten by our lion also. We call them lion and kite. We call them tertiary consumer and also an apex because no one will eat them. So, I hope naintindihan natin yung difference ng food chain and food web. So, again, when we say food chain, it is a simplest feeding relationship and it is one directional only compared to our food web that it has many food chains and it's a little bit complicated compared to the food chain. So here we have the trophic level. So the trophic level, it shows the levels of every organism or consumers in our food chain or food web. So the different feeding positions in a food chain or food web are called trophic levels. The first trophic level consists of producers, the second of primary consumers, the third of secondary consumers, and so on. There are usually no more than 4 or 5 trophic levels in a food chain or food web. Energy is passed up the food chain from one trophic level to the next. However, only about 10% of the total energy is stored in organism at one trophic level is actually transferred to the organism at the next trophic level. So the rest of the energy is used for metabolic processes or lost to the environment as heat. As a result, less energy is available to organism at each successive trophic levels. So the amount of energy at different trophic levels can be represented by an energy pyramid. Okay. So as I say, trophic level shows the level of every organism or consumers in a food web or food chain. So I have here and also pero yung energy percentage na makukuha ng isang organism, i-represent lang natin siya sa ating energy pyramid later. Okay, so we have here the trophic levels. So ito siya yung trophic levels. So trophic level, we have first trophic level there, where it goes food makes its own food. Example is plants makes food. Okay, producer can make their own food compared to our consumers na they are depending to our producer because consumers cannot provide their own food. Okay, so sa producer gets their food through the sun, right? They're getting energy through the sun, and then they process it and they called it photosynthesis. So our second trophic level, the primary consumer consumes producer. Mice eat plant seeds. So mice eats the plants or our producer. The next one is the third trophic level, secondary consumer consumes primary consumer. So snake eats the mice. So after the mice eating the seeds, pupunta na po tayo kay snakes that the mice will eat them. Okay, its consumer eats consumer. Okay, trophic level, fourth trophic level, we have tertiary consumer. It consumes secondary consumers. Hawks eat snakes. So ito lang po yung trophic level, ni-explain niya lang dito kung ano yung level ng isang organism or consumer sa isang food chain or food web. So we have hawks eats snake. It's also the consumer eats consumers. So energy pyramid, a pyramid of energy represent how much energy initially from the sun is retained or stored in the form of new biomass at each trophic level in an ecosystem. So typically, about 10% of the energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next, thus preventing a large number of trophic levels. Okay. Once our producer is eaten by a consumer, we do not expect the same energy our producer has na maita-transfer to our consumers. The same goes with the consumers who eat another consumers. Hindi the same energy the consumer has cannot be transferred to the consumer who eaten our consumers. Mababawasan every process ng ating food chain or food web ang energy ng isang organisms. Excuse me. So I have here an example of energy pyramid. have here? So, ayan. So, energy pyramid. So, as always, lagi pong mauna si producer, and then susunod na ang ating primary, which is the rabbit. So, the energy from the producer will be transferred to our rabbit or primary consumers, and while the pyramid goes, unti-unting nababawasan yung ating energy or energy ng ating ng rabbit, once kinain naman na si rabbit or our primary consumers will be eaten by our secondary consumers, the same goes, mababawasan din yung energy na meron si rabbit na mapupunta kay ating snakes. Okay? So, the next one is we have the tertiary consumers, the eagle or hawk. So, here, makikita natin na yung energy na transferred from the snake eaten by the hawk is mababawasan din. So, habang pataas ang ating pyramid, while our pyramid is going up, the energy is going low. So, always remember na mas mataas yung energy level ng nasa baba ng at below our pyramid is it has a higher level of energy, while on the top of our pyramid it has a low energy level. So here, biomass pyramid. Because there is a less energy at higher tropic levels, there are usually fewer organisms as well. Organisms tend to be larger in size at higher tropic levels, but their smaller numbers still result in less biomass. So, biomass is the total mass of an organism in a tropic level or other grouping of organisms. So, ito susunod lang. So, we have here the biomass pyramid. So, I think this is an ecosystem, a marine ecosystem. So, of course, the first one is our producer. We have here the seagrass, algae, and I don't know the other one. So, makikita natin below our producer may nakalagay na 1,000 pounds. Yun yung energy level na meron ng ating producer. So, the second level, we have the first consumer or the primary consumer, which is a small fish, Atlantic blue tang. Okay. So, makikita natin sa baba ng Atlantic blue tang, there is 100 pounds. So, it means, yung kinain na algae ng ating blue tang ay 100 pounds na lang yung napunta sa ating primary consumers. Hindi na siya same ng 1,000 pounds na meron si algae nung kinain siya ng ating Atlantic blue tang. So, yun, habang tumataas yung pyramid, pababa yung energy level na meron yung isang organism. Okay, the next one is we have the intermediate predators or our secondary consumers na makikita natin dito ay meron na lang 10 pounds nung kinain niya yung ating primary consumers. So, the same goes sa ating top predators or our tertiary consumers na 1 pound na lang yung nakain na energy from our secondary consumers. So, not because mas malaki yung ating top predators, mas marami na siyang nakakain. No. Kapag nasa taas siya ng pyramid natin, sa pinaka-top ng pyramid natin, siya yung may pinaka-konting nakakain or nakukuhang energy level. Okay. Kasi, as I say here, smaller numbers result in less biomass. Okay, so we have here the key to remember. Ecosystem is made up of a community and its physical abiotic environment. Community is all the population of organisms living in a particular habitat. So, habitat is the place where an organism lives, and it is a place where they can meet their needs. population, a group of organisms of the same species living in a particular habitat. All members of a community live in the same ecosystem, but they do not live in the same part of ecosystem. So, ocean. Ocean is the largest ecosystem on our planet. Okay. So another key to remember, we have the food chains and food webs, model feeding relationship, and ecosystems. This is food chain, and food chain is our model feeding relationship in an ecosystem. This shows energy and materials are transferred between trophic level when consumers eat producer or their organism. So when we want to show energy flow in our ecosystem, we can use the food chain and food webs. Okay. So, food web is a diagram of feeding relationships that includes multiple intersecting food chains. So, in the difference of food web and food chain, food web has multiple intersecting food chains. When we say food chain, it has only one only one food feeding relationship. It is the simplest feeding relationship, our food chain. So energy is passed up the food chain from one trophic level to the next, but lot of it's lost along the way. So sinabi kanina natin sa energy pyramid, no, once na our pyramid is going up, o tumataas yung ating pyramid, patas na patas, pakonti ng pakonti yung energy na nakukonsume ng isang consumer. So, there is less biomass at the top of the food chain than there is at the bottom. So, arrows in the food chain or food web used to show where the energy is going. So, in-explain ko siya kanina, explain it already na when the arrow shows where is the energy is going. So, we have here the herbivores, they only eat plants. The carnivores, they eat only meat. Our omnivores, they can eat both plants and meats. So, we have already learned about several things about ecosystem. So, all of the energy in an ecosystem starts with the sun. Okay, it's always starts from the sun. Our producer gets its energy from the sun, and they going to process it, and they called it photosynthesis. So without the sun, they can process food. Kapag walang na-process na food ang our producer, walang kakainin ng ating consumers or our animals. So all things in an ecosystem are either abiotic or biotic. So biotic factors are grouped by each organism eats. Example of our biotic is animals. And we have abiotic factors are group of non-living things. So our example for non-living things is soil, air, water. And organism needs energy to live. So every organism in our ecosystem needs energy to live. Same goes to us that we need energy to live also. We need the sun to live, to get some energy. So energy moves through an ecosystem when one organism eats another organism. This keeps the ecosystem going. So, if we want to show the ways of energy moves through an ecosystem, we use a food chain or a food web. So, producer use the sun to get energy and make their food through a process called photosynthesis. So, in-explain ko siya kanina na our producer gets the energy from our sun, then they process it and call it photosynthesis. So, consumers have to eat the producer or other consumer to get their energy. Decomposers get energy from eating dead consumers and producer. So, our decomposer also play an important role in our ecosystem because they're the one who's eating our dead plants and dead animals. Then yung they are the responsible, parang sila yung gumagawa or they're the one who's making the fertilizer na kailangan ng ating producer or our plant to produce more food. Okay, so may important role din ang ating decomposer. So that's all for today. So I hope guys you understand, and thank you for listening. Thank you for listening guys. Bye bye.